until the Q&A time. Right. So let me share chapter 3 slides. Okay. We meet every class. This is a synchronous online class, meaning that from 11 a.m. to 12:15 p.m. every Mondays and Wednesdays, we have Zoom class. That's the meaning of synchronous online class, and this is a synchronous online class. So we meet every Monday and Wednesday, the class time, right? So in this chapter 3, you learn the ratio analysis. So how many different categories of ratios you learned? There are 5 categories. So in each of the 5 categories, there are different ratios. So these ratios have different purposes. So well, among those 5 categories, there are liquidity ratios, leverage ratios, asset utilization ratios or turnover ratios, and profitability ratios and market value ratios. So you should understand what are those ratios for and what kind of ratios are there. And you should also be able to calculate each ratio using financial statement data, and you should be able to explain and interpret how to use these ratios. So for example, if a company, when you are comparing 2 companies, competitors, for example, and one company has a current ratio much lower than the other competitor. So that means the company that has a very low current ratio may have some liquidity issues. So, and you may also look at how did the current ratio change for this company. If this company's current ratio dropped sharply from previous year, there may be some liquidity issue. But also, I also emphasized that, but high liquidity ratio is not always a good thing, because current assets, liquid assets, don't generate high return, but the capital is costly. So just the right level of liquidity. But liquidity ratio too low, that means the company cannot pay bill easily, so that's a huge problem. So you should be able to understand the meaning and do the calculation, interpretation. So those are the 5 categories of ratios, and this is a summary slide. And in the next slide, we move on to a different topic, and which is DuPont Identity. So DuPont Identity, this method was developed in the company, famous chemical company DuPont. So DuPont developed this method. The reason is they wanted to improve profitability measured by return on equity. And how to improve return on equity? So there are 3 areas of improving profitability measured by return on equity. And DuPont Identity was developed to identify those 3 areas where companies can improve its return on equity. So as you know, return on equity's definition, what is it? The return on equity means how much net income. So net income means profit. So Sometimes people call net profit, call it net profit, net income, profit. So the official term used in a financial statement is net income, but sometimes people call it net profit. By profits, sometimes they mean net income. So the official definition of return on equity is net income. So where do you find the net income? Income statement, right? So income statement show net income and divided by total equity. So where can you find the total equity? From balance sheet. So net income divided by total equity is return on equity. So if a company has a high return on equity, that's a good thing for shareholders. So they wanna, for the given amount of equity capital provided by shareholders to the company generated a lot of profit. So that's a good thing. So that's why high return on equity is desirable. So that's why DuPont Identity was developed to identify ways to find the methods to improve return on equity. So this is the key formula. So return on equity is net income divided by total equity. And then you keep multiplying the same thing, like sales divided by sales, total asset divided by total asset. So if you multiply the same thing up and down, the equality is preserved. So net income divided by total equity is the definition of return on equity, but you start by dividing net income by sales instead of total equity. But if you divide the net income by sales, so sales is downstairs. So to preserve the equality, you need to multiply sales in the numerator to the numerator as well. So sales here it's divided, sales appears in the denominator, and here sales appears in the numerator. So these two cancel out. So the equality was preserved. And you do the same trick using total asset. Total asset is here in the numerator. Total asset is here in the denominator. So numerator, denominator, total assets cancel out. So these two cancel out, these two cancel out. So this equality is preserved. Net income divided by total equity. And that's how to decompose return on equity profit measure into three things. So what is net income divided by sales? So how much profit, net income generated out of sales? So that's a profit margin, another profit measure. So profit margin multiplied by what is sales divided by total asset turnover. So this is an asset utilization ratio. So how much sales were made out of total assets? So in other words, how efficiently the company managed its total assets to generate sales. So asset utilization measure, so total asset multiplied by, what is this? The last item in the DuPont Identity decomposition is total asset divided by total equity. So total asset versus total equity, which one is larger? Of course, total asset, because total asset includes both total equity and total debt. So if you are looking at a company and that company has a total asset a lot larger than total equity, what does that mean? The company has a lot of debt. So total asset versus total equity, the difference is debt. So if a company, so total asset to total equity, that ratio is called the equity multiplier and measure of leverage. So if a company has high equity multiplier, that means the company has a lot of debt. So using leverage debt is shown by equity multiplier. So these are the three components of return on equity based on DuPont Identity. So that means, how can a company increase its return on equity? There are three ways. How? Either increasing profit margin by increasing the profitability of its operation, or increasing total asset turnover by improving the asset utilization of the company. Or, so these two ratios are about the operations, how to make their operations, sales, and asset production more efficient. So either by improving their margins or operations, or borrowing, changing the capital structure. Instead of using more equity, using more debt. Because why using more debt affect return on equity? Because usually equity capital is more costly because it's more risky than debt capital. So equity holders, stockholders require higher return than banks, creditors, because stockholders are residual claimants. Later in this, later chapters will teach you the difference between bonds and stocks. So stockholders are taking more risk, and that means that stockholders require higher return. So debt capital is less expensive on average. So required return on debt is lower. So that's why using more debt, cheaper financing compared to equity financing, that kind of capital structure decision may affect return on equity capital. So all the details about risk return trade-off, bonds versus stocks, we are gonna come back later, that kind of issue. But right now in chapter 3, what you should understand clearly is leverage affects return on equity. And how do you know that? You can use DuPont Identity to show that. Higher equity multiplier, all else equal. So if you suppose you are looking at two companies, their operations are exactly the same. So suppose you are looking at two competitors, their operations look exactly the same. Same kind of assets, same product, same sales, everything else is equal. But if one company is using more debt than the other company, and then their return on equity will be different. So if all else equal, company A uses more debt than company B. Company A will have a higher equity multiplier, so company A will have a higher return on equity. Even though their operations look exactly the same, because of leverage, return on equity will be higher. But that's during a normal period. But when recession hits and the company struggles, and then the company with more debt, company A, will struggle a lot. Because during recession, higher debt means bankruptcy risk. So there is another whole different discussions about using debt. But you are not ready to do that kind of discussions yet. So that kind of capital structure decision and riskiness of that, it's a more advanced topic. But right now, what you need to understand here is leverage affect return on equity. So during a normal period and for healthy companies using the right amount of debt, in that kind of case, using more debt may improve return on equity because equity multiplier is related to return on equity. Any questions so far? No? All right. So the next slide summarizes what I just explained to you. Profit margin is a measure of the company's operating efficiency. Total asset turnover is the company's asset use efficiency. So both these two ratios are related to the company's operations. How much margin the company is generating, how efficiently the company is using their assets. So these two measures are related to the company's operations, and the more efficient the company runs the business and the more profitable the company makes companies' operations are, the higher margins the companies earn for the same amount of sales, return on equity will be higher. And the last component is a company's measures the company's financial leverage. So capital structure decision, debt versus equity. All right. So you finished the DuPont Identity. And the next remaining slides are just a summary of how to use this information. So this chapter 3, is about evaluating financial statements of a company. So why do we learn how to evaluate financial companies? So internal usage and external usage are there. So internal usage, by that I mean the company's CEOs, the CEO of a company. Like suppose you are the CEO of Target, and Target CEO wants to evaluate where we can improve. So that kind of internal use, performance evaluation, and so that, and the Target CEO may want to look at each business unit's profitability. For example, profit margin, and each business unit's total asset turnover, for example. Or the company CEO may want to see, are we okay? So how much leverage we are using? So internal uses to make better decisions, so performance evaluation. Also, the CEO may want to look at, we are making a plan for next year. So are we utilizing our assets? How is our asset utilization? So when we make plans for next year, so where we stand currently in terms of our asset utilization. So that kind of planning for the future, guiding, estimating what kind of profits the company can make, how much cash flow the company can make. So that kind of planning purposes, internal financial statement ratios can be used. And also, this financial statement will be used by outsiders, like stockholders, like Wall Street analysts will definitely use financial statements to do the calculation, like PE ratios we learned. So that kind of calculations will be done by analysts. So that's an external use example. Also, banks and bondholders will take a look at the financial ratios and statement, and will use financial ratios for evaluation. Also, suppliers and customers would be interested in the financial ratios as well. So when benchmarking financial ratios, So ratios, when we use calculate financial ratios, the number itself may not tell a lot of storage. So it's useful when we compare the ratio of a company with others. So it can be peer group analysis, so competitors within the same industry using SIC code or NAIC as industry classification codes to find the peer, or in more advanced finance courses, you will learn other sources of finding peer groups. So for example, in this class, you start using Bloomberg market concepts, Bloomberg terminals, how to use Bloomberg terminals. So when you take a BMC class, you're gonna learn about how to find useful, more advanced information using sophisticated tools like Bloomberg terminal, and the Bloomberg terminal is a good source of finding the right competitor for a company. Unfortunately, in this introductory class, we don't have time. I don't have time for you to teach you how to use the Bloomberg terminal to find the peer groups. But in later, those finance students who will take a finance 5330 security analysis, you're going to use. Those students will use Bloomberg terminal to find competitors, so peer groups. And another benchmarking is using the company's own history. So as I mentioned before, current ratio, if it's 0.9, so current asset is smaller than current liability. So is it the liquidity issue is a huge problem? But then you can take a look at how was the current ratio of this company last year, the previous year. And when you look at the current ratio of that company for 5 years, previous 5 years, and it was always low, like 0.9, 0.8, 0.7, then you start thinking, maybe it's the industry characteristics. So low current ratio, maybe didn't cause any problems during the past 5 years. That means you don't need to worry too much about it right now. So times trend is also important. And another example, this company's P ratio, 24. It's higher. Is it expensive? Does it mean it's expensive? No, its P ratio last year was 30, but now it's only 22. So that means, the stock got cheaper. Why it got cheaper? So time trend analysis, time series comparison of ratios may also give you some ideas about how to interpret the ratio. So, but there are also potential problems. So how to interpret the financial ratios, it's not a very well, it's more like from the real world applications. So there is not a very deep theory about each ratio. But still, this ratio is useful in many applications. And another challenge when using ratios is a company has many different types of business, diversified firms. For example, companies like GE. GE is a very well diversified conglomerate, has many different products, light bulbs and healthcare products, financial units. So in that kind of companies, it's hard to find peer group. Another example, Disney. Companies like Disney, they make movies. So movie business, and also they have theme parks, Disneyland, Disney World. So theme park business versus making movies, very different types of business, and all the sales and asset utilization, all the numbers are aggregated. So it's hard to use the company-wide, let's just say company-wide asset utilization ratios, total asset turnover ratio combined for theme park and movie making combined together, it's not very useful. So that's the point I'm making here. Benchmarking is difficult for diversified firms. Yeah, and also accounting rules. So those inputs for ratio analysis come from accounting. And accounting, as you know, US uses GAAP, and European firms and Asian firms, many of them uses international accounting standards, and GAAP is not the only accounting standards companies use. So each country has different rules. So international accounting standards not necessarily the same as GAAP. There are many differences. So that makes, but we are living in a global economy. So companies compete globally. But one company uses GAAP, another company uses international accounting standard. Led by European firm, European regulators, then the numbers might not be comparable. And also, like inventory issues like FIFO versus LIFO, so different accounting standards are allowing different treatment for the same item. So that makes also comparison challenging. Also, there may be extraordinary events like M&A, divestitures, so that kind of special acquisitions, that kind of special events make each year's number, or one-time tax rule change, something like that. So that we need to make that kind of adjustment, and that makes using those ratios and financial statements challenging. But still, despite these potential problems, still these numbers and these analysis, the ratio analysis, is still a quite useful tool for insiders and outsiders of companies. All right, so we finished chapter 3. So let me stop sharing and take a moment. So, and do you have any questions on chapter 3, ratio analysis? No? Then you must complete your connect problem set by Wednesday night. So the homeworks have been open on Connect for a while, more than 2 weeks. So, and we completed the chapter, so you are in a good position to review all those ratios and then test your understanding by doing the homework problem set. And I see many of you already submitted it, so thank you. And you should note that as written in the syllabus clearly, you have multiple, unlimited number of attempts for Connect homework problem sets. So don't worry about losing points from your first trial, as long as you learn, and after each trial, you can see the solutions, and then you can try again to improve if you didn't do well in the first trial, and you can repeat, and the highest score from the homework, Connect the homework problem set will be your grade. But you should keep in mind that there is a penalty, late penalty. So don't be late, a late penalty of 1% per hour. So before the due date, there is no penalty for repeating the trial, but after the due date, there will be a late penalty, 1% per hour. So don't miss the deadline. So practice during the 2 week. And I give you at least 10 days. So each homework problem sets are open at least 10 days on Connect. So don't miss the deadline, and practice and submit your best, show your best work to get a good grade from the homework problem set. And keep doing the reading assignment. So reading assignments goal is to make sure that you have some kind of preparation to listen to my lecture. So if you come to attend the Zoom class without any preparation and just listen to it, it may take longer for you to digest the information. So I strongly recommend you do the reading assignment and use the slides posted on Blackboard as a guide on what is important there. So any questions on chapter 3? So it looks like it's so connect account. It's surprising already. So Americomov, you still have a connect account. It's surprising. It's so you stay after the class, and then I will let's talk to you. Yeah. So I can help you at the end of this class. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, I see other class many issues connect, but in this class we don't have issues. So this one, so I spent actually a lot of time to prevent this connect issues, and so far it has been working. And still, I haven't noticed any specific issues in this class, but Connect has a good team. And I have a good relationship with them. So if there is a student, any student having any connect issue, send me an email. And then also in the future, if there is a connect issue, you take a screenshot as a proof and send it to me, and then we will work from there. So what I will do is, if there is a connect issue, you take a screenshot and you send an email to Connect technical support, and they are gonna copy me in the email. Then I will know you submitted the problem to Connect, and then I have a special line. So Connect has a special line between professors and technical support, and I will work with them to investigate the issue and try to solve the issue as quickly as possible. So that's how I manage this Connect, this class, the Connect account seamlessly. So far it worked well. So, but if there is any student, I can investigate with you, okay? Any other questions? And then let's go to chapter 4. Okay. All right, chapter 4. Yeah, chapter 4 is a quite challenging chapter. So it's a very important chapter, but it's a challenging chapter. So so you should pay very special attention to chapter 4. Compared to the previous chapters and later chapters, I would say chapter 4 is one of the most challenging chapters. It's very important, but it's important. It has many important concepts, but it may be confusing. The level of the materials in this class, in this chapter 4, is higher than other chapters. So that said, but I'll try to make all these contents as accessible, as easily accessible to you as possible. So pay special attention to the topic. So chapter 4 is about long-term planning. So put yourself in the shoes of a company. Let's pick an easy company like Target. So everybody understands what Target does. So that's why I picked this kind of simple, easy to understand company, Target. So Target. Suppose you are you got an internship at Target's CFO's office, and we are in pandemic, COVID case, and groceries and others sales, also online sales, and there are many issues there. And the CFO is now doing a planning, long-term planning. So what kind of tasks the CFO of Target is up to? So this chapter is about that kind of long-term financial planning, and also companies should grow. So the goal of all companies are to make their sales grow, make their profits grow. So for example, we go back to Target, all right, during this pandemic, everybody understands online sales is important, and everybody knows that Amazon is a big player and is a big winner during this pandemic. How can Target compete with Amazon and Walmart in this rapidly growing online sales, online retailing area? So if you are an intern for Target's CFO's office, you may see Target's CFO is interested in analyzing how to increase Target's sales during this pandemic, especially in this online environment. So when companies do financial planning, so what kind of elements are in corporate financial planning? There are 4 elements. First, investment in new assets. So going back to this Target example, should the company invest in more cloud technology and to develop more infrastructure for better infrastructure for to improve online sales? So that's an important investment decision. So purchasing some equipment, and also the company may want to use like electronic devices to keep track of the inventory, and also some investments in equipment and technology to analyze customers' demand. So what kind of products are more in high demand, will be in more high demand next year. So investment in new assets. So this is a capital budgeting decision. So another decision, another element of corporate financial planning is, okay, we made the CFO's office identified what kind of assets will be purchased and what kind of investment will be made, what kind of investment project will be launched next year. So let's say, and they did some initial investigation and then determined that, there are like 5 projects, new projects that requires investment in new assets, and then 3 of them looks valuable. After the analysis, 3 of them is more valuable to the company compared to the other 2. So the CFO's office decided that the 3 projects out of the proposed 5 will start next year. And then, of course, during that kind of evaluation process, how much money will be needed for those 3 projects? So let's say 300 million. So investments in new assets evaluated. So how do companies evaluate which projects will start? So that's what we are going to learn later in this semester too. And that's the main topic. So the details of how to decide which project will be accepted, which project is rejected. So that kind of detailed discussions, don't worry, you're going to learn later. What you clearly understand now is, corporate financial planning requires that kind of decision. And that decision we call capital budgeting decision. So capital budgeting decision means investment in new assets and how much money we will need for that kind of investment in new assets. So once the CFO makes that capital budgeting decision, it will be clear how much money the CFO will need to find to make that project happen. So let's say it turns out it's a $300 million target, let's say, after the capital budgeting, project decision, target CFO figured that $300 million will be needed during the next fiscal year to do the investment. And then the next question is where to find that $300 million using retained earnings. So hopefully Target makes out of a significant amount of Target's net income will be reinvested for the next year's project. So retained earning can be a source of, can be used for those projects. But what if 300 million retained earning is less than 300 million? Then external financing is needed. So remember in chapter 2, you learned net new equity, net new borrowing. So that kind of concept. So new equity or new debt will need. So let's say retained earning available for the new project is expected to be $200 million. So that means 100 million more of external financing is needed for those good projects that CFO's office identified. So how to raise $100 million short for the capital? So that's when you need to make, that CFO needs to make the capital structure decisions. So $100 million, will it be borrowed from a bank? Yeah, that's possible. So that will increase the total debt. And how about selling more stocks? So you go to the stock market, but Target is already a publicly traded stock. So it's not IPO. Initial public offering already happened many, many years ago for Target. So in that case, what companies Target can do to raise additional capital out of the stock market? There is a concept called the seasoned equity offering. So seasoned equity offering means already public company sell additional stock, more stock to raise more equity capital. So which one is better? So that's called the capital structure decision. Degree of financial leverage determined by capital structure decision. So what are the issues there? So if Target decides to issue more debt, how does that decision relate to what you learned in the previous chapter we just finished? DuPont Identity. So if Target decides to use more debt and increase its equity multiplier, that will increase return on equity we calculate during the normal time. Yeah, so that's, so what my point is, what you learn in this chapter is all related to other topics you learned in the previous chapters. And also this, what you learn in this financial planning chapter will also be used when you do bond valuation, stock valuation, and project valuation. So all those concepts are related each other. So don't get lost. So try to, so in each chapter, my recommendation is you understand each chapter's core concept clearly and try to relate how this ratio analysis is related to the long-term planning concept. And how these two concepts are related to stock valuation, we are going to learn in later chapters. So hopefully at the end of this semester, you have all the chapters, core concepts, and you have a big picture of how to make a good how to make good financial management decisions for a corporation. And there are a lot of components of those decisions, and where are those key tools and concepts. You can pinpoint those key concepts and tools out of those many previous chapters and put all the puzzle pieces in the right place, and you are able to explain how to make good financial management decisions in a corporation. So that should be the goal. Right? All right. So capital budgeting decision and capital structure decisions, and also there are other decisions. Dividend policy. So companies generate net income, and part of it is paid out as dividend. It goes out of the company and paid to shareholders. But most companies do not pay everything to their shareholders. Part of it kept within the company to be used for next year's new project. So in my previous numerical example using target, 200 million was used, will be kept for next year's capital need. But the CFO there may be a different opinion. So CFO may think 200 million retained earning will be used, but their CEO may suggest that, oh, how about we pay more dividends? So 20 million more dividends. So instead of 200 million, the company will reinvest 180 million and then raise 120 million instead of 100 million. So there may be difference in that kind of capital. There may be, so capital structure decision and dividend policy decisions are related. Yeah, so both are about how to, these decisions are not about operations. These decisions, capital structure decisions and dividend policy decisions are about capital structure. So debt and equity, dividends. It's not about what operations. It's about capital structure and payouts. And the next decision is about working capital decisions. So the first one, capital budgeting, and the last one, working capital decisions, are about operations. So how much, so in short, liquidity requirements. So to do the new, so because of the next year's new project, there will be differences in working capital needs. Inventory needs may change, and how fast the company can collect credit sales, receivables, payables, all those current assets, current liabilities, dynamic may change because of the new project. And then how to make the company be able to pay bills without any problem. So that's the working capital management decision. So all those 4 decisions are core elements of corporate financial planning. And if everything remains the same next year versus this year, the problem will be easy, but you know that we are living in a very dynamic world. A lot of things change, and the company's goals should sell more, make profits more, keep trying to develop new products, new services, and compete with the competitors, succeed in the competition with the competitors. And so that should be the company's goal. So long-term planning to make the company become more profitable and selling more and earning more. So the companies should keep finding new profitable projects, and that kind of to support that kind of goal, what kind of planning should be done. So that's the main topic of this chapter. So that's why this chapter is very challenging, because it's about future, it's about planning for the futures, and it's a complicated task, as you know. So financial plan, in the financial planning process, planning horizons are short-term versus long-term. So by short-term, we mean usually up to a year. So for the next 12 months, so that's the short-term planning period. And long-term, so CFOs and CEOs should do both short-term planning and long-term planning. And I think that principle applies to everybody. So to you, for example, as a student, you should have a short-term goal. What kind of courses I'm going to take next semester, and what kind of internship I want to apply for. So that kind of short-term planning, and then long-term planning. In 2 to 5 years, what I'm going to do. So what I'm going to study when I'm going to graduate, and what kind of job I'm looking for. So 2 to 5 years. But you may want to make a realistic goal. So right now, I don't think this kind of job is out of reach, considering my grade and others. But in the long, so I will start with, I make a reasonable expectation, and so I will start apply for this kind of internship. But in the long run, in 5 years, so I will take the ladder and I will keep improving in terms of my knowledge and specific experience. So in the long run, in 5 years, my goal is to work there in this kind of company. So that kind of long-term goal and long-term plan versus short-term goals. So that applies to everybody, students, professors as well, and also in this chapter, companies. So companies, managers, financial managers of companies like CFOs, they should have a short-term up to 12 months goal as well as long-term. So what should this company look like in 5 years? So to make that goal, to make that happen, what should the company plan for? So that's about this chapter. So planning horizon, determining planning horizon, but when companies make a long-term goal, large companies like Target make a long-term goal, there must be many different components of that long-term plan. And then, so planning each component well is very important, but also aggregation. So each important project, definitely we have implications. So aggregation, combining all capital budgeting decisions, investment made here may be utilized. So this equipment may be utilized by this project as well. So don't make separate. So first start with separate plans and then try to combine, aggregate, and make it a gigantic capital budgeting project. And based on that, how much is the capital need, and develop capital structure decisions, something like that. And also, when companies make this kind of plans, it's they need to make some assumptions, because plans are by definition about the future, and nobody can predict for the future for sure. So nobody can do that. So forecasting, planning definitely depends on what's going to happen in the future, and we don't know about it. So that's why we need to make assumptions, and we need to make realistic assumptions about important variables. So for example, assumptions, suppose we can make the sales grow 10%. Is it a realistic goal? If so, go ahead. And so for a very rapidly growing industry, 10% sales increase goal might be too conservative in a very rapidly growing industry. Then increase the goal, sales increase goal. But make sure that the company's goal is realistic. And that even though the company makes some realistic goals, the economy might change. So for example, COVID-19 is an example. The company might have made a realistic goal of increasing sales this much, but COVID-19 hit and everything changed. So what are you gonna do for next year? So what's gonna happen next year? Nobody can tell for sure. So it depends on when the reliable vaccine will be developed and made available at a reasonable cost to many people. So that kind of scenario, so optimistic scenario and normal scenario and pessimistic scenario. What if so I hope not, but what if in worst case, vaccine development is delayed and we have some bad outcomes, side effects prevent, and that kind of situation, in that kind of worst case scenario, for that kind of worst case scenario, the companies should be prepared for as well. So make several scenarios and plan and determine at a minimum worst case, normal case, and best case scenarios. All right. And then what should remain? So the role of financial planning is exploring options and examining there are many decisions. As you see, in 4 areas, there are many decisions, different projects and different financing tools, working capital. There are many decisions they may have related to each other. So if one decision is made, and that has an implication to the other decisions. So examine interactions and explore different options. And so to make sure try to identify all variables, at least important variables, to avoid the surprises and make the plans feasible and consistent. But as you can imagine, this is a very challenging task, but still it's a very important task. So we understand the challenges, and so that's why this is a very important but challenging task. All right. So as I emphasized before, there are outside factors. When companies make decisions and plans, the company's decisions are affected by outside environment. So especially the macroeconomic environment affects the company's decisions. That's why I emphasize in this class, you take the Bloomberg Market Concepts Economic Indicators module. But don't worry. So this chapter is, and PMC is covers like the entire concepts taught in this class. So I made the deadline long enough for you. So I already posted the project, the class project, experiential learning project on Blackboard, and it will be due in December. And you're gonna use PMC to do the project. But I posted the Bloomberg experiential learning project only on Blackboard to help you plan. So it's kind of a long-term plan for your class. So make a long-term plan for this entire semester and how to take the BMC economic indicator module and complete the projects. The project due date will be December, but you need to plan ahead to make this long-term goal achieve the goal. So this is how this chapter and PMC and the project will work. So I'm helping you to make a long-term plan. So the remaining slides are about forecasting and planning the details. So let's take like a 2-3 minutes. So you think about what you have learned so far, and try, if you have any questions, you type it in the chat box. During this 2-3 minute period, I'm gonna take attendance using the screenshot. So how I take attendance is those who arrive, plan ahead and arrive early, I take attendance while I admit you from the waiting room to the classroom. So I take attendance that time. But those who come late or some kind of changes in the middle of the Zoom class, I take a screenshot and to supplement that kind of attendance process. So during this 2-3 minute period, I will stop sharing and I will take a screenshot to take attendance. All right. And this is the first page, and we have 2 pages. So I'm gonna take another screenshot. And then, yes, all right, this must cover everyone, all right? And then let's see if there is any question. So Wei Hao, I see that you asked, can the COVID affect the equation? So Wei Hao, you can speak. So what do you mean? Which equation do you mean? You can speak. You can unmute and speak, Wei Hao. Wei Hao, I will unmute you. So Wei Hao, you can speak. So you forgot. Okay, so you don't have a question? So COVID crisis, like this kind of macroeconomic environment change, definitely affect all the companies' business environments. It will affect. So, for example, a company planned like airlines. So it's a good example. Cruise airlines might there are many airlines ordered airplanes from Boeing before the COVID-19 crisis. Because the airline, it takes many years to build an airplane. So many companies ordered airplanes from Boeing and Boeing many years ahead, but definitely that should have changed during the COVID-19 crisis. People are not, the airline reservation, air travel reservation dropped sharply. So there, many companies just canceled the old airplane order. So that's an example of making adjustments in the capital budgeting decision. Yeah, so COVID-19 definitely affects many decisions, financial management decisions. All right, any other questions? If you don't have any other questions, let's go back to chapter 4 slides. So because we have many, so what's remaining in this chapter is using numerical examples to analyze a financial planning example. So from slide 6 to slide 12, this is using a numerical example to show how to construct a pro forma financial statements based on forecasts. So this is a separate topic, very important, but challenging topic. And I don't think we have enough time to cover all the details. So just I will skim through. So what what kind of concept I want to teach you. So but the details we are gonna do on Wednesday for this numerical example. So let me just show. So we start with this. So in this financial planning, sales forecast is a key. So as you know, income statement will start with the sales revenue. So when companies make forecasts about the future, sales forecast is a key. And based on sales forecast, financial planning process aims at developing pro forma financial statements. So it's different from historical statements. Historical financial statements are about what happened in the past. But when you're planning for the future, nothing happened yet. It's about forecast, what's going to happen in the future. So what if this happen in the future, what will the balance sheet and what will the income statement look like? So that kind of a future predicted, forecasted financial statements are pro forma financial statements. So pro forma financial statements, to make that based on your prediction and based on your plan, you need to forecast the sales. And to make that amount of sales revenue happen, what kind of equipment, additional equipment is needed? So what kind of inventory is needed? So additional assets will need to be identified, and how much money needed to secure that additional asset. So that should be a part of the planning. And after identifying required assets, how much money and that money, where does the money come from? That equity, so that's about financing decision. And plug variable, and this financial planning means managers decide this variable. So how to finance that long-term, how to finance those capital needs, asset needs. So that's what we mean by plug variable. So financing related variable, the company's managers should choose. So plug variable determine, it's very important to for you to remember that plug variable is the decision of the managers. It's decided by managers for what? For financial planning. In what area? Financing area. Capital structure and financing area. It's not about plug variable, it's not about operation, it's about financing. And it's determined by it's the manager's decision. And as I emphasized before, financial planning needs to develop scenarios because there are many factors outside of the manager's control. The plug variable was the manager's decision, but there are other variables that are not plug variables, that are variables outside of the manager's control. So those are economic variables like COVID, so vaccine for COVID-19, something like that, or interest rate or oil price, that kind of macroeconomic and GDP growth. So those outside the environment, managers don't have a control. So those are economic environment, economic assumptions. So, but nobody can predict the economic environment for the future. So that's why monitoring, we use more economic indicators as a monitor, and we make assumptions on the economic environment. And that's why I require you take PMC's economic indicator module to learn about this macroeconomic variables, economic environment. So with that said, there is a very simple example of a company, simple company, balance sheet, income statement for gourmet coffee. So using this historical balance sheet and income statement, this example shows how you can make a plan and forecast for this company's future. So short-term planning, so let's use the 1 year planning for this company for the next year. So to make a plan, to make each of our future, there should be assumptions. So the key variable, the most important variable forecast you need to make is sales forecast. So here is the assumption. So what if sales revenue grows at 15%? So 2000 was the last year's sales growing at 15%. So what if sales revenue becomes 2,300? So using this, make a pro forma balance sheet and pro forma income statement. That's your task in this numerical example. Then I told you you need to make reasonable assumptions. So what are reasonable assumptions? So we have 15% growth assumption in sales. And what's going to happen to the cost? So reasonable assumption should be, yeah, sales grows by 15%, costs grow at the same rate. So let's use cost to grow. All items tied to directly sales grow at 15%. So make this kind of, so start with the sales forecast assumption and try to think about what to do with other items in the balance sheet and income statement and determine which one grows at the same rate, 15%, and which one is not. So the remaining slides are about how using those assumptions to calculate items in balance sheet and income statement. But remember, I told you there is a plug-in variable about financing. So that equity, that's a plug-in variable. So it's the manager's decision. So how do those managers will decide about how much debt will be used? So that's where cases appear. So if, for example, managers decide to make that as a plug-in variable and decides that no dividends will be paid out, that everything will be recycled, retained. That kind of case versus what if the manager's decision is making dividends a plug-in variable and equity increases at 15%. So that kind of different decisions have different implications. So this slide summarizes the issues in percentage of sales approaches and giving another example as a numerical example to explain the external financing needs. So we don't have enough time to go over this, so I will explain it on Wednesday. And after I explain that those numerical examples in detail on Wednesdays, we are going to talk about calculating these two: growth rate, internal growth rate, and sustainable growth rate. And growth rate has a huge implication on stock valuation. So company's goal should be increasing the value of the company's stock for shareholders, because managers are agents of principals. So principals are stockholders, and growth is a very important component for stock valuation. And there are two different types of growth rates: internal growth rate and sustainable growth rate. You're going to learn how to calculate those. So don't forget to complete the homework on Connect, and I will see you Wednesday. Okay. And if you have questions, I can stay